When you turn the key to on position, the EPS warning light should illuminate like this, but when you start the car, it should go out. But if it stays on or if it flashes, that's an indication that you have an EPS problem. Now on this car, the EPS control module and the motor, actually everything that's needed, such as the torque sensor and the steering angle sensor, they are internal to this, and they call it the steering column. So it's located up on the steering shaft, and some designs have all of that down on the steering rack. Now, if it's either the motor or the module that went bad and needs to be replaced, neither one you will be able to replace separately. Actually, you have to replace not only this part, but it goes together with the steering shaft and the intermediate shaft. So basically everything inside of the car, minus the steering wheel, will have to be replaced. Now, when you replace the steering column with the new one, you will have to perform the EPS control module configuration. If you want to remove this steering column, first you should disconnect the intermediate shaft from the pinion shaft, and then remove the nuts that are holding the steering column fixed to the dashboard member. There's some 4 nuts. It's important because this is like 10 kilos heavy, and if you disconnect it here, its weight plus the leverage force that would be applied to here could do some damage. So also when you put it back, when you install it back, do it in a reverse order, right? First, fix it to the dashboard member. Okay. Exactly. This is the clutch, brake pedal, gas pedal. First thing, you remove this cover to have access to where the intermediate shaft connects to the pinion shaft. Okay. Between the intermediate shaft and the steering column, there's a joint, but there's also the joint bolt that you should never ever touch. They say that the bolt cannot be reused and the new bolt cannot be obtained. So if you loosen it or remove it, simply you have to replace with the new steering column. I don't know why this bolt is so important, but that's what they say. Do not touch that bolt. Okay, that's the bolt. Down there is the intermediate shaft, and up is the steering column. Somebody even put the mark on it and on the surrounding metal, and it's easy to verify if it was loosened. It never should be loosened. Never ever. It says Ford Motor Company making electric power steering for Mazda. Now there you can see the EPS motor, and these are the connectors for the EPS control module, which is right above. So these two wires, red and blue, these are the CAN wires, a twisted pair. There's a brown with the black that comes from the ignition switch, and there are two thick wires. This is ground, the black with the white stripe, and there's another one. It's hidden behind. It's a black wire coming from the EPS fuse. That's the 60 amp EPS fuse. This thick wire goes to the EPS motor. Power for the EPS motor. This is the main 200 amps to the ignition switch, and STR 250 amps, of course, power for the starter motor. And actually this is the wire that the alternator is charging the battery through this wire as well. See, ground for the motor and the power for the motor from the ignition to CAN wires. This is a view down into the engine bay. See, this is the steering rack, and this is the dust cover, white plastic, and inside is the pinion shaft that goes through the firewall, and inside it is connected to the intermediate shaft. Okay. Now, when you disconnect the intermediate shaft from the pinion shaft for any other reason other than the replacement of the steering column, say you want to replace the steering rack, it is important before disconnecting these two to lock the steering shaft. Basically what you do, you just turn the key to lock position and take it out so that the steering shaft is fixed in place, so it will not rotate, because if it does rotate, it will mess up the steering angle sensor inside. And what will happen is when you put it back together and start the car, and when you turn the steering wheel from lock to lock all the way to to one side, then all the way to the other side, the EPS warning light will either flash or illuminate steadily, and that's an indication that hey, you have to perform what's called an EPS steering angle calibration, and that's what they do easily with the factory scan tool down at the dealership. But hey, maybe you should not resort to that. Now, if you turn the key to on position and the EPS warning light does not illuminate, you may think, hey, maybe it's an instrument cluster, maybe it's not the control module. And the way to check that is to command bidirectionally with your scan tool to that particular light to illuminate. And if you are not able to turn it on, then the instrument cluster is the problem. Same also if the EPS warning light stays on after you start the car, you will command the light to turn off, and if it doesn't turn off, again, you have an instrument cluster problem rather than the EPS control module problem. Now this is the hood or bonnet latch lever. I wanted to remove this trim, and you have to remove this lever, and also there's a bolt or a screw rather behind there, and I almost broke it, but it's easy. You just pry it with the screwdriver like here, and instead I was thinking I want to somehow disconnect the cable, but it's just easy. It just pops out, pops easily in as well. Easy job. Again, an intermediate shaft. There's that notorious bolt that you should never ever touch. There is a motor behind this bracket. Okay, and this is the EPS control module with the wiring. This is the tilt lever to tilt the steering column. And this is just the trim that I didn't remove this time. Back to intermediate shaft. See this? Supposedly this slides in and out to like a shock absorber, but only in and out. I think it cannot rotate inside. The joint bolt. I don't know why is it so important not to touch this bolt. I don't know, maybe some safety concerns, maybe exaggeration, but that's what they say. The motor, the module. This guy here, I don't know, probably there are torque sensors and the steering angle sensors inside, whatever. When I remove the lower trim connector for the headlight beam height leveling, as well as the DLC connector down there. A good way to reinforce your knowledge. Pin 6 and 14, blue and red, CAN lines. Power on pin 16 and grounds pin 4 and pin 5. That's it, guys. Bye.